Okay, good morning. And Steve, thanks once again for that hymn. And a reminder, of course, we don't need to be reminded, but we are reminded this is Holy Week.
I see.
And of course, yep, what's that?
I see an insert of whoever's talking. I saw shut up, but on top of your presentation.
Okay, I do too. On my iPad, I see you speaking right now, and I'm limited. I can't see the gallery view this morning. So if you have something you'd like to say, just do what Bill did and be rudely and interrupt. I'm just kidding. So we're in week 267, and as I'm using the term monumental movement from chapter 19 to chapter 20, and we're engaging that this morning. Let's begin. We're going to talk about darkness as not only a physical condition, of which we here are in Oregon are now in darkness in early morning, but there is some other, it's a metaphor for some other things that are happening. Mary comes to the tomb early on Sunday morning. On the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb, about now, this time of day. It was still dark, and she saw the stone already removed from the tomb. And so she ran and came to Simon Peter and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved. And she said to them two things. They have taken the Lord from the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him. That's what we're going to look at this morning. John tells us that Mary Magdalene comes to the tomb while it's still dark. You can see in the image that the sun is just starting, the eastern horizon is just starting to get light. She sees the stone rolled away from the tomb. Darkness describes the early hour, but also describes Mary's interpretive state that she's in. The two correlate. She does not arrive as a blank slate. That's really important. She arrives preloaded. We're going to use that term, and I love the term. Preloaded with grief because of what happened on Friday. Memory, she's in trauma. And everything she has learned about how death works through her life experience. So she would naturally come to a tomb expecting her world to line up with what she would expect. And she sees something quite different, fellas, a stone rolled away. And I'll let you fill in the word, whatever word you choose, what the, in regard to her response. So what's going on with Mary? We're going to slow it down like we often do and look at what is going on inside of her. She does not go to the tomb and look in at this point, which is, that in itself is a very interesting detail. So I'm no psychologist. Steve would be the closest, having been trained in this whole discipline. But from what I'm reading and verified through my experience and what I observe around me is that Mary is experiencing a psychological condition called cognitive, which means mind, narrowing. Her mind is being narrowed at this moment because what is happening around her, of which she is able to observe to some degree, is entirely out of her realm. She has no explanation. And the description of what this term, cognitive narrowing, means is under intense emotional stress, which fits Mary right now, our brains tend to narrow the range of available options or interpretations. And I'm attempting to explain not in a realm of expertise, but from what I read, and from my own experience. She is in trauma, and when she's confronted with something entirely outside of her understanding, her brain ability to facilitate data is narrowing. Speed, it's speed that's prioritizing over thoroughness. We don't sit and analyze options. When Mary is not analyzing the options here, he's trying to derive meaning as quickly as possible. And I find this whole thing fascinating. So what that means a little bit more is familiar explanations at the moment override novel ones. The resurrection would be in the novel category, definitely. And so that is dismissed without probably her awareness. I mean, she has no grid for resurrection. Meaning is supplied quickly to regain stability. So the whole idea, this narrowing, is the idea that we derive from our own experience, because that's all we have. Is it A, door one, door two, door three? It must be door one. And the whole idea is it's not a thorough investigation. It's to try to bring back stability in a very traumatic occurrence. And that's all done because we're human. It's not a failure of reason. It's how the nervous system protects us in moments of shock and loss. And I think if we could stop here and talk about our own experience of how this has been true. In a situation, we don't analyze options. We respond as quickly as possible in a traumatic emergency, kind of what we would derive as an emergency. This helps us understand Mary's response. So that term cognitive narrowing is what I've applied to how to understand Mary at this time. She sees the stone has been removed. She doesn't go and look into the tomb to verify her assumptions here, but she runs. She runs away, which is understandable. I really get that. She is, she's in fear. The unknown yields to action. That's the only action that that comes to mind at the moment. If we come in contact with the unfamiliar, that which is outside our box of understanding, our first response is running and action. Cognitive narrowing limits curiosity. In other words, she's not there to analyze. Her index finger is not on her chin thinking, God, what are all the available options here? She is in no space for that at this moment. And the whole idea is get to a conclusion. Her system is not open to possibilities. She needs, that term that we're going to use is coherence. She needs to arrive at a place of coherence in her mind, bringing the unfamiliarity of the moment to a reasonable conclusion of why. That's paramount. So first point, coherence rules. In this kind of situation, high tense, it's how we operate as humans. Coherence, bring coherence in meaning as quickly as possible. Compression then occurs. That would be the second. It's the whole idea of reduction and moving into this narrowing focus. Her first words, she runs, she comes to the disciples, and out of this narrowed frame, and she says, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb. Well, That's her statement. That's her interpretation of the resurrection. That's important to understand. She is applying her understanding to something that has occurred. She's got the ability to observe, to see, but she has limited her own ability. She didn't know if the body was still in the tomb, but she assumed because of the stone being rolled away that it was. She's making leapfrog assumptions because of this condition of narrowing, cognitive narrowing. She's coming to her own conclusions. The empty tomb is a fact. Okay, we know that, and we know that by faith. But her conclusion is what she creates in her head as an interpretation. Fellas, I have talked about this idea in numerous ways in the course of our study, and I will often say adherence to what is real, what is truth. Because here we come face to face with a wonderful illustration of what I'm talking about. The truth is, Jesus has resurrected from the dead. But she observes that and she interprets that through her own limited lens of understanding. She creates her story. It's not the story that in its focus, it's a portion true, but it's way out of whack of what has actually occurred. She is not yet in a frame of reference to understand or to grasp what has actually occurred. And I find that really fascinating. According to Mary, it's obvious. The only explanation, because of her own limitations, is that someone must have acted. And she's also assuming that. She doesn't know. She did not verify the body was present or not. She's just assuming that. Someone must have taken him, is what her conclusion is. Within her narrowed field of meaning, and so that's where cognitive narrowing comes in. Resurrection is not imaginable. She has no grid for that. It's not because she lacks faith. She's not in sin. She's human. It's because trauma has compressed her interpretive horizon. She is in trauma and she has to derive meaning as quickly as possible, and all she has is the clubs in her bag. So we've got coherence trumps, takes over. We've got a compression that happens, and fear is the dominating emotion at this moment. Her second statement deepens that picture, and she says, "We do not know where they have laid him." They have laid him. There's a we and there is a they. We and they. Mary we know she's in the dark physically, and she's in the dark emotionally because she has no personal meaning. She is grappling, or we would call it in our Christian terms, struggling. Loss has multiplied. She has been experiencing loss for 3 days, and she's grappling with the grief, with the loss. Meaning has slipped further away through her own interpretation. Resurrection has occurred, but she doesn't know it. The unnamed they, there it is, reflects her perception of being boxed in. Fellas, this is so human. When you and I are in a state of tension, this isn't a conservative Christian issue, this is a human issue. And it's so reflective of our culture today in numerous ways. when we are in tension, we need to come to the place of explanation as quickly as possible. So what we do is we define a they. This goes into what we've talked about many times with Rene Girard and the scapegoat mechanism. We need to identify a they so we can then build a story to attach meaning, and so I can basically feel better about myself. And that's using raw language, but I personally think it's true. The unmeaning or unexplanation is very, very difficult for us humans to navigate. We lose our footing, and it creates a fear response that it's just really difficult for us to handle. The easiest response is create a they, someone to blame, someone to attach anger to, some scapegoat that I can create so that I can navigate this and feel better about me. Fear dominates. Because fear dominates, I should say, trust is nowhere to be found. If we could talk about we won't, but if we had time to talk about the tension of fear and trust. I look at trust as those are two diametrically opposed. When we're in fear, we cannot trust because fear dominates. So now we're going to broaden this out a little bit. What John reveals is something profoundly human, of which I've alluded to already. We never encounter reality unfiltered. That's my statement that I think is true. We never come to a situation with a blank slate, a clean slate. Mike brings Mike to whatever Mike engages with. And I think that's true of each of us. We arrive, and there's that term, preloaded. We're preloaded. I'm preloaded with the teachings I've received, the way I think, my own experiences, my expectations, my disappointments. And within that, there is the human need to survive. All of this is being brought in my backpack through my lenses to interpret anything that's happening within my realm. If what is in my realm is within the scope of my understanding, like stopping at a red light, I know that, and that's easy to navigate. But coming to an empty tomb on Sunday morning where the person on the other side should be dead and the stone is rolled away, that's outside of my box, and it's outside of Mary's box as well. Thus, I build my own story. Under stress, those preloads tighten. So a little more explanation. They become pronounced. Cognitive narrowing is not a sin, fellas. It's absolutely human. And it's what we humans tend to do under pressure. Now, the other side of the coin. Resurrection happens without Mary's approval. God does what God does regardless, because God is God. New life has occurred, and she can't see it. So Mary creates her own explanation as an interpretation of the facts, like we've talked about in this session. At the core of her interpretation is the story she creates, is what we all tend to create, an us and them story. She creates us and them so she can bring meaning to the moment. Only later does she recognize the resurrection for what it is? John invites us to see that resurrection does not require interpretive clarity as a prerequisite. That should be an overarching point here, that Mary is demonstrating what it means to be human in light of revelation of God moving in a profound manner. And she just flat out doesn't get it. And you know what? God is okay with that. God is with us within the darkness we bring with us. If we could capture that one phrase and think about it this week during the Holy Week, God is with us within the darkness, even within the darkness we bring with us. That is quite a thing to think about. Mary comes to the tomb while it's still dark. And that darkness is more than the time of day we've talked about. It reflects her interpretive state, like we've already stated. Grief narrows her field of meaning so that the empty tomb can only mean one thing in her mind: someone took him. John shows us that resurrection doesn't begin with clarity. Quite the contrary. It meets us inside. Resurrection meets us inside the cognitive narrowing that we create. This is a demonstration of the grace of God being present with Mary and with us. That's what we believe. And here's a question that we can bring to table time. We've got about 20 minutes. When your life, let's talk about it. And again, I'm limited. So if you want to say something, please speak up and then take the microphone, say, because I can't see a hand. I only see Bill right now. But whoever speaks, I'll be able to see and interact with. And so in your life, when your life has grief, like we've all experienced, stress, disappointment, when your interpretation has narrowed, let me just ask a question. When in your life, that's what I'm asking. Talk about, if you would, talk about your own experience. When you have experienced this idea of narrowing, what it was like. And I think we'd all love to hear your story. So feel free to jump in there, fellas.
Yeah, Mike, I had a thought, and this is not spiritual at all, but it validates what's being said here, is that one of the things I think going on here is the stress of all of this has caused Mary to also forget what Christ had told all of them. He had he had told them all along, or toward the end of his ministry on this earth, he had told them what he was going to do. He told them
That's
what he was
true.
walking toward. And
Yeah.
she's obviously kind of missed the boat here, or the stress has caused her to forget what Jesus said. And I have an example, just kind of a true life thing. In when I first got to FedEx and was a second officer there, and being a flight engineer, one of the things they would do is put you in the simulator and give you different emergencies. Uh, and all this time they had been training you, telling you what you would do in this situation. But as the stress ramped up during this emergency, I would forget what it
Right.
was I was supposed to do. And I'd be staring at this panel going, what's going on? What do I need to do? So I think some of what this stress is doing, in addition to narrowing the focus and everything is that, it causes us to forget things that we've already learned and should know to be able to deal with a stressful situation like that.
That's an excellent point, Jeff. That is so true. And for much of my experience as adult, especially being a dad, I was convinced that information was what was needed at the moment. And I don't nullify that whole thing, but the assumption that if a person has the right information, they will act in an appropriate way when the time comes is not true. It's not necessarily true, because stress is an unknown that's induced, and you said it so clearly, it causes us to forget. That's very good. Yeah, great story. Great story. Thanks,
Mike,
Jeff.
Mike Totsy's hand is up.
Okay, Totsy, I can't see your hand, but go ahead and talk. Thanks, Vince.
At age 51, you've heard my testimony before.
Right.
So when I was age 51, I was fired at my job, and my immediate reaction was, that's a disaster. And I'm trying like crazy to look for another job, but God had other plans. On my long trips back there, and it forced me not to get another job, which I deemed as a disaster. And the gist of it was that kind of valley of being fired, not getting another job, forced me actually in those long drives from Maine back to Virginia to, to kind of, and then when I got back there, I ended up, well, I didn't have anything else to do but participate in the church where I was not necessarily a believer. Well, that whole situation changed, and my brother would write me a poem. Those were the days when no email. He would write me a poem by mail every day. It would come in the mail, or of course, a little bit late, but anyway, it changed my valley of despair
Right.
of being fired to being converted to a born again Christian by being forced to participate in the
Right.
church when I got back. So
That's another great example. Yeah. Sorry, did I cut you off, Totsy?
yeah, no, that's okay.
Yeah, that is a really great example where what appeared to be a disastrous situation, which we don't want to minimize that, it was painful, but somehow you were able to work through that, and out of it came a metaphorically resurrection experience out of death.
Well, I don't think it was me. It was actually the Lord actually
Yeah,
working.
I think we would all concur with that. Yeah, that you were brought through it. Boy, that's another really, really good story. Thanks, Totsy.
So, Mike,
Yeah, that's Dean. I know Dean's voice. I can't see Dean.
yeah,
Go
a
ahead.
couple things I got out of the message today, which was really a good one, was first of all, you're talk about cognitive narrowing. I can remember, times in the shop, when I'd get a call and or I'd decide that something didn't go right, and it was, I wouldn't call it disastrous, but you kind of get into a panic mode, and you kind of
Right.
storming around and this and that, and how can I fix this? And before you know it, you go, oh no, I got to get the kids picked up from school. And what I'm getting at that is, you've completely forgot about other
Yeah.
things that you really need to get done. But
Yeah.
the thing that I thought was fascinating about your message today was when Mary goes to the tomb, she didn't go, "Hey, cool guys, he resurrected."
Oh, yeah.
It's it's like, so she must have had a little bit of uh,
That's right.
non-belief,
Yeah.
she knew everything was going to happen, but in that state of panic, she didn't realize what really happened. and and but it goes back to me. My thoughts are, when you read the Bible, it's God's story, and He's dealing with human beings. And when you read the Gospels, they are 100%. They're all true, but they don't tell that story from the exact same angle. And the non-believers want to tell you that it's this and that, and I'm going, no, that is proof that the Bible is true. Is the fact that this story isn't, it isn't this perfect story that everybody's lining up on the same angle.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
anyway,
thank you.
I'm
That's so
rambling.
true. Yeah, you're not rambling, Dean. We're just very appreciative of your contribution. And it's so true. We've all gotten the call that puts us in a sideways and we forget to get the kids.
Yeah.
I get that. I think we all get that.
Yeah.
And
Mike,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Vin.
excuse me, Mike. Your comment impressed me that information is not solely what's missing when you make a bad turn. You
Right.
think if I had all the right information, I'd do the right thing, and life doesn't really prove that out many times. And you were asking about personal experiences. The most recent for me was I had a heart blockage in my artery, and my doctor told me that we'll go in there and we'll unblock it, and you'll be home by 11, kind of a thing. And so I'm going into this procedure thinking, here's 3 hours out of my life and I'll be okay when it's done. And then the surgeon peeked over her little mask and said, "We can't do this. We're going to have to open you up."
Whoa.
And I'm asking people, like, did I hear what she said? Is that really?
Whoa. Wow.
Did that stone really roll away on its own? What's going on here? And even though I got the information clearly, it just didn't register. It was so contrary to what I expected that even in the face of clear information, my brain just wouldn't take it, wouldn't accept it. Turns out I did, in fact, not need that. But at the moment, it was like I was in the Twilight Zone,
Right.
And I can relate to Mary's, I'm going to go here, I'm going to visit my Lord, and maybe I can, keep guard or so, whatever our plans were. And then the stone is gone, rolled away, and it's like, oh my gosh, and the idea of stealing him away is not a new idea. I mean, the guards were posted for that purpose, so no one,
Yep.
But it is, when you get faced with information you're not expecting, I don't think your brain is that agile.
No, I agree. Yeah. And yet another really good story. And it is so apparent from this incident in front of us, there is a reality that has occurred. What is real? He is raised from the dead. That's real. But Mary cannot embrace that because of her narrowing, because of the trauma she's in. And that is so much a part, just to reiterate, that is just so much a part of our experience that we miss, or we create our own story over and over. I know I have, over and over again. I think we got time for maybe one more story. And then, because I've got to leave a little early, would somebody like to tell a story? And thank you, Vince. That was another good one.
Okay.
Okay, Bill, you're on.
Well, I'm kind of thinking on Dean's line. There's two issues here. One is, did Mary forget, which Jeff taught up, did Mary, I remember for a while we had discussions a long time ago in a group I was in about whether when we have faith, is that mental assent or is it truly believing? And there's a difference between the two. I mentally assent to it, but if my feet hit the fire, I suddenly have a hard time believing. And they knew the resurrection. I mean, Jesus said the resurrection, and they have the world of view of resurrection circulating in their community. You find that in Maccabees and stuff. But do you really believe in the resurrection? And you go like, yeah, I've heard about it. I believe it, but that's out in the future. I don't believe it now. And that's the thing she has to wrestle with. No, it's real and it's right now. And so
It's
I think there's a
happening
lot
right
of,
now.
yeah. And so there are a lot of things I give mental assent to, but I'm going to have someone hold my feet to the fire when the time comes to believe it, you know?
You're not alone. And I wish I could comment more. I wish we could comment, but I've really got to cut this off because we got to get out the door. And so, guys, I apologize for being abrupt. Bill, thank you, and the other stories. And I'll be here next week. I'll actually be home next week. So sorry for the abrupt ending, fellas, but I've got to run. We'll see you next week.